Morning Neuro Ninjas, welcome to this week's Wellbeing Workout. So this week it's really interesting. We're looking at perfectionism, and many more people suffer from this than we realise. We think it's just us, but perfectionism occurs in many situations. And today we're going to look at why it happens and, crucially, what we can do about it. And don't forget, if you're part of an organisation that subscribes to us, you can access a coach that can help you begin to deal with perfectionism. So psychologists have explored perfectionism, and these are the areas where you might be experiencing perfectionism. The focus of perfectionism is a concern over mistakes, doubts about our actions, second guessing ourselves. It might be, if you're a young person, or actually if you're an older person, excessive concern about other people's expectations, particularly parents, might be friends, but often it's parents. It might involve excessively high personal standards, ridiculously high, like I've got to write that perfect sentence, I've got to submit that perfect report, and concern about precision, order and organisation to a point of obsession, which means that we actually get stuck procrastinating perhaps. So perfectionism in detail, it's an excessive concern over mistakes and doubts about our actions, and crucially the evaluation of those actions and their correctness by other people. Ultimately, at heart, perfectionism is a fear of failure, a fear of mistakes, a fear of setbacks, and it locks us up. So in terms of the experience of someone experiencing perfectionism, how does it feel? It's about feeling low confidence and low personal self-worth. It's driven by fear of rejection, someone giving us negative feedback, us feeling bad as a result. It can lead to us being very indecisive before or after events or actions, and because it drives us away from processing experiences, it's about avoiding pain and emotional suffering, but what then happens is we just lock up that pain and suffering. And it creates this perfectionist vicious cycle. So we might, for example, delay taking So perfectionism creates this very upsetting vicious cycle of emotional suffering. We might have a set of thoughts about actions and events. Those thoughts generate strong feelings and emotions about actions and events, which cause us to delay or take excessive time over those actions, events, and we end up going around and around and around, feeling bad, not getting much stuff done. In a nutshell, perfectionism is a response to the world that appears, at face value, to value high standards and excellence, but actually misrepresents the complexity of the world through cognitive distortions and simplification. It is driven by fear of other people's negative evaluations of our actions, our character, and our achievements. And perfectionism, upsettingly, is correlated with a range of other mental health conditions: eating disorders, depression and anxiety, bipolar disorder, general anxiety disorder, social anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder. They kind of overlap on a Venn diagram. Perfectionism is a form of a cognitive distortion, usually a minimization cognitive distortion, where we're minimizing our ability to achieve things and we're maximizing the dangers of not doing things well, of being picked up for any minor mistakes. We're jumping to conclusions as well about other people's approaches to those mistakes. It generates lots of thinking in the bottom part of the prefrontal cortex, this area at the bottom, which is also strengthened by actions, for example, using screens a lot. Now, when that area gets very strong, we end up ruminating, we end up brooding, we end up vacillating. Perfectionism is the brain turning its own intelligence on itself. It's a brain experiencing unresolved arguments between circuits. It's a brain lost in a simplistic, cognitively distorted version of reality where beliefs shape experience to create a terrible growth-defeating paradigm. It's driven by basic brain biases, and they become latched to overriding narratives. And perfectionism involves confirmation bias, self-defeating bias, and narrative bias. So let's just explain those. Our brain uses very quick models to apply to situations, and one common bias the brain has is confirmation bias. We apply a search criteria to reality that only confirm our pre-existing beliefs. We get stuck. So we've got a pre-existing belief that we can't do that thing, or we're going to make terrible mistakes, and then we look for those mistakes. The second bias that also feeds perfectionism is self-serving or self-defeating bias. And this is on the negative side of these self-serving and self-defeating biases. The other side might be narcissism. This side is perfectionism, bad. We get blame in terms of other people's responses to us. And again, it's a form of cognitive distortion, either minimization or magnification, cognitive distortions. And finally, a narrative bias is the story the brain tells itself about our experience. We join the dots of experience and tell ourselves a story about what is happening and what we're like that is much more correlative than causative, and it is much less true and much more casual and unthought through. It's just the brain babbling to itself, telling itself a story. And those stories are powerful. They shape our mental routines, which in turn shape the pathways we build through our neural architecture. So let's just explore perfectionism. Something happens in the world when we face a difficulty or a setback, and what then happens is the brain experiences lots of circuits reacting to that setback, that unexpected situation, that mistake. So let's take an example. You're writing a sales report and you're finding it really difficult. Your learning progress circuits run a commentary like this. They're noticing that you're not making much progress in the task. They start generating feelings of anxiety and worries. Your goal-orientated circuits are alerted by the fact the learning progress circuits are feeling anxious and worried, and they start noticing that you're not achieving good responses in terms of the report. Your emotion and threat detection circuits are initiated by that anxiety, and you start to feel more and more worried. Adrenaline is released, reducing your ability to concentrate, increasing your worries. And finally, the amygdala, which spots threats, goes off, sounding an alarm, and we start to experience lots of overthinking, lots of cognitive distortions, things like, I'm never going to finish this report, my boss doesn't like me anyway, she's only looking for an excuse to get rid of me. When something occurs that the brain wasn't expecting, millions of circuits have to activate to deal with the problem. That activation may help us deal with the problem if we have a balanced response, but in a perfectionist brain, we're not balanced yet. What can we do about this increased activation when the brain spots change? We can't stop it, and we shouldn't try to stop it. We should notice it's happening and apply thought strategies that help us calm down and resolve the problem. So, in this video, we've seen that perfectionism is a broken model of how change and progress actually happen in the real world. Change and progress are driven by mistakes and setbacks. It's actually involving social management circuits designed to ensure that we fit with our group, getting out of their lane and interfering with execution of complex actions in the world. And as you'd expect from us, there's a net to help you resolve perfectionism. I'm not going to go through every one of these threads now, but it's there, it's available, we're here to help you. Get in touch if you want one-to-one coaching. Email me. Thanks for listening, we'll see you